Steve lives in Iowa, does a show from Iowa, and has been part of the caucus scene for at least 20 years, and really knows it inside and out, and can tell us, what do you think is going to happen tonight?
Well, yesterday, a good friend of mine who's doing some advanced work for Trump's reelect was canvassing the eastern third of the state, Glenn, because that's the most Democratic state or part of the state. And Iowa's divided into thirds. The most eastern part's the most Democratic. The most western part is the most Republican. And then the middle part where I live is probably the most ideological, and it's 50-50. And so he wanted to go where there's going to be the highest Democratic turnout in the state. And listening to him and tell me what he saw over the weekend, I mean, he said Bernie Sanders is the only candidate right now whose events are an event. And he has little doubt that Bernie's going to win, and I agree with him. But it's really fluid after that. And anybody who tells you they think they know for sure either has a magic 8-ball or they watched the Super Bowl halftime show with Jeb Bush last night. So it's really, really fluid after that.
So Bernie Sanders is going to win, you say, in Iowa tonight. And does anything change if the caucus, because most people don't understand what a caucus is like. You're going into a gym and, you know, everybody's making a case and they're swapping and bartering and saying, hey, you know, your candidate's not going to, you know, place in the top 3. But if our 2 candidates get together, then we can place our candidate, you know, at number 1, and, you know, we're ideologically lined up. So it's horse trading.
Exactly.
Because it is so fluid, is there a chance that somebody is everybody's number 2 and that person beats Sanders?
I would have said yes until the stunt Elizabeth Warren. She's having a listen to what you were just saying about Ted and his thoughts on impeachment. She's having a bad political instinct month. All right. I would have said yes a few weeks ago. I think she was pretty much everybody's second choice, which is really where you want to be in the environment you're describing.
Correct.
But what her and CNN tried to pull on Bernie with the live hot mic after the debate, really, I think it calcified her support, which on one end is good, but I think it limited her ability to grow beyond that. I think she kind of got rid of a lot of the era of good feelings around her as a candidate and was kind of just seen as kind of doing her own thing. And I think that hurt her. And so I think what you've got to watch tonight, we've got this 15% threshold that Democrats demand their candidates meet to get to show up on the final ballot. If Andrew Yang and Amy Klobuchar and Tulsi Gabbard definitely won't get 15%. I don't think Yang will. Klobuchar could be right around there. I think Warren could be maybe just a little above that. What happens when the horse trading begins with those candidates? And that's why I think it's going to be so fluid, is if Andrew Yang, where do Andrew Yang's people go? Do they go to a Pete Buttigieg? Do they go to a Joe Biden? I can't really see them going en masse to a Bernie Sanders. From a temperament standpoint, those two guys couldn't be any different. So I think that's what makes this very fluid. And here's the other thing to watch from a Joe Biden perspective. You can't finish 4th or 5th. If you lead the national polls for a year and the first time there's a vote, you finish 4th or 5th, you're toast. And his people are going to say, well, John McCain finished 4th in the Iowa caucuses. Okay, you're right. And then he got his arse licked in the general election. So I'm not sure that's the precedent that you're going for here. So I think there's certain cosmetics involved where that is concerned as well that definitely bear watching tonight. And then a trend that your audience needs to know. In the Democratic Party, no one that didn't win a contested Iowa caucus since 1988 has been their nominee. Hasn't happened since 1988. Dick Gephardt won a close victory over Michael Dukakis. That's the last time someone that was the Democratic nominee didn't win Iowa. And if you look to where Bernie's polling in New Hampshire here in a few days, a week from tomorrow, anybody in either party that has won both Iowa and New Hampshire has been the nominee every single time.
I don't know if those norms stand anymore, though. I mean, I see the sense in it because it just gives momentum. But you know, I just don't know. I look at Bernie today as the closest thing to Donald Trump that the Democrats have. He is just a total disruptor. Mm-hmm. And many Democrats are looking for that. I mean, look, Bernie Sanders said the establishment, the Republican and Democratic establishment are the real target here, the real enemy. Well, that kind of sounds like Donald Trump. I mean,
agreed. Yeah.
He's
and I disagree that norms have been violated. I think that's one of the great misunderstandings of the Trump era is that all these norms have changed. I think the cake is all still baked the same. Largely, people are still going for the same coalitions. You see Trump now actively making not just a passive, let me give a speech, but actively making a play for black voters like we really haven't seen Republicans do in decades.
Mm-hmm.
And now that would be a norm change if he could get 12 to 15% of the black vote, for example. But if you look at everything else, it's all stayed the same. The cake is still made the same. The frosting is just zanier. All right. So all the same ingredients that went into the cake before are still making the cakes now. It's the frosting we have on it is just zanier than it used to be.
But what I think is changing is there are more and more people that are saying, I want a different cake. I don't want cake. I want pie.
Agreed.
And that is, I don't know where that is in the cycle, but it's in the cycle of Donald Trump, and people would still like to see more of the establishment clobbered by Donald Trump, and not just the left establishment, but the right establishment. There is that hunger, and that's different.
Yep, I do agree. Now, and that's where you're seeing disruptor candidates. I think Ron Paul was maybe an initial foray into this back in 2016.
Yeah.
And then I think what you're seeing it now is in spades with Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, because people are looking for vehicles that give them a voice outside of the traditional two-party system. There's an immense amount of frustration with that system that it doesn't really serve needs. It's essentially a status quo, establishmentarian, monolithic process that doesn't look out for the values of the average everyday American. And that's why, I think if the economy is doing well, then Trump could, if Bernie is the nominee, he could get Jeremy Corbyn. But if the economy slumps next year, I would not just sit there and say there's no way, he's too far left, they'll never vote for him. We said the same thing about Bill Clinton in 1992.
Oh, yeah.
More and more people said that about Barack Obama in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
We'll never vote for Jeremiah Wright's disciple. We'll never vote for a draft dodger like Clinton. If the economy goes south, people get desperate. And the messaging, the Bolshevik versus Menshevik messaging that Bernie is tapping into, that he's a lifelong believer in, actually gains an audience in times like that.
I agree. The coronavirus could put us into that state.
Yes and no. I mean, I think it depends on that's a double-edged sword to what it does to the Chinese economy. And this has always been the...
No. I mean, they're saying today, they've come out and said, it looks like it is going to be a pandemic. And that's the first time they've said that. And it is...
Here's the thing. The World Health Organization issued a warning about China over the weekend, but then didn't think it was worth barring travel there at the exact same time. It was a very convoluted warning. I mean, if you think it's worthy of a warning, then why wouldn't you bar travel there? That doesn't make any sense. And the only thing I can think of is because economically what China means in the global economy, they're trying to figure out what's a narrow path to carve here with realistically what it could mean on a health scale to them, but then economically what it means for the rest of the global economy because of their standing. And I think that could be a unique challenge for our own economy next year. And it's why a trade war with them was always a double-edged sword, because on one hand, they're one of the landlords around here, and on the other hand, they're screwing us at the exact same time. And so managing that was always going to be difficult.
So, Steve, do you see the democratic socialism? Do you think that this is led by the party, or do you think the average Democrat's willing to accept a democratic socialist?
I think there is no democratic establishment anymore, Glenn. And I think that, we love in conservative media the talking point the last few years about the RNC outrages the DNC. And that's just a complete fallacy. And here's why. What happened after 2016, when Debbie Wasserman Schultz had her thumb on the scale for Hillary Clinton, their base defunded voluntarily their party. Look at the amount of money their candidates raise individually. Amy Klobuchar has not had a poll showing her higher than fourth in Iowa, And she ran more ads in our state this year because of the money she raised. She ran more ads. She had more money than Marco Rubio had to get on television. Their candidates individually raised a huge amount of money. And so what that tells you is they've just bypassed the Democratic establishment. They're just going to do this independently. And I think that's why you're not seeing troves of Democrat leaders and senior statesmen come out and trash Bernie Sanders, because I think they're concerned that when the music stops playing, they're going to be left without a seat to sit in, that this may be the new establishment. It may have nicer packaging in the future than what Bernie Sanders with a shake fist, with his Nikita Khrushchev impression. It may be nicer and softer, but this may be essentially where their party is going. And I think that's why you haven't seen them go all out to put a roadblock and try and stop him, because I think they're afraid they might get run over by the exact same movement.
And then what happens to all those Democrats? Is there a big number that won't go with democratic socialism?
I think there is a number. How big of that number is, I think, comes down to what the economy is doing next year. Mm-hmm. And if anybody at the White House, and I've got some friends there too, like you do, if anybody at the White House is listening to this, I'm just telling you, on the cultural issues that Trump's base cares the most about, and that he is the best, that's his wheelhouse, are those kinds of issues. Black and brown voters are far friendlier to Trump's messaging on those issues than the white exurbanites and suburbanites that people like me live next to. They're the ones flooding the zone for Pete Buttigieg right now. They're the ones that go to the First Church of Virtue Signaling. So I would absolutely encourage the White House's reelect team to keep going down the road it's going with black and brown voters, but I would actually message them more on these cultural issues and to show that the Democratic Party is outside the mainstream of where all of you people go to church all over America. You've got more culturally in common with them than you probably do the average person that caucused for Mitt Romney here in Iowa 4 years ago.
And I think that ad, the first ad for Donald Trump with judicial reform, I thought that was one of the most effective ads I've ever seen from the Republican Party to reach out to a new group of possible constituents.
Yeah, I agree with you on that from a messaging standpoint. I've got a private little text change that's we keep it anonymous with some good friends of mine that are in politics, some in office, some work for candidates, and there's a lot of conservatives that are very, I would say, mercurial where that first step legislation is concerned. But one of the things I said in our text chain about this last night, we are not the intended audience for that ad. The intended audience for that ad, absolutely, and they don't watch MSNBC and CNN, but they were all watching the Super Bowl, and they got that message. Absolutely, they did.
Very good.